everyone, welcome to Briar Haus Writes. I'm Becky Parker, and today it is my honor to be able to have with us today artist, author Kelly Knowles. Kelly is a not only a writer, but she's also a speaker who speaks at local different kind of corporate events from all over. She's also a life coach, and she's with Kelly K Consulting. Kelly, welcome to our program.
Thank you, Becky. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. Kelly, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I always like to talk about I have Midwestern rather, not Mideastern, Midwestern roots. But I grew up in East Tennessee, so that always throws people off because I like pearls and I have that full Southern accent, and then I get really direct, and people are like, "We don't know what to do with you." So I enjoy sharing that. But I think my biggest thing is I consider myself a lifelong learner. That doesn't mean that I like to learn everything, but I have just found that if I stop learning, I'm going to just stop. So that is part of my personality,
Mhm.
which has segued into a lot of the things that I have done over the years. I have lived in Middle Tennessee since the 1900s. We'll leave it there. So
Well, how did you become interested in writing?
It has been a unique progress for me. If people say, "Are you a writer?" I've often said, "No, I'm not." And then people are like, "Yes, you are." So I'm still in a little bit of that dissonance around writing. But one of the things that I started my book in my 20s, so it's been a minute, and I put little bit of skin in the game a couple of years ago and said, "I'm going to finish this." And I really felt like the timing was good. What had been interesting is prior to that, I had been writing blogs for color code personality science. I have been certified in that particular profile since 2017 and
Mhm.
had the opportunity to write blogs for them and did several. So it was one of those where I was like, oh, maybe I am more of a writer. And then during the pandemic, the firm that I was working for, I was able to be a contributor on a newsletter that they were using just to try to help connect people. So my writing journey has been a little bit less formal, I think, than some people who talk about I've been writing my whole life. For me, I have, but it didn't feel that way, if that makes sense.
It does. Um, I wanted to ask you though, you've written a book called Chin Hairs and Other Things Mama Didn't Tell You. I love the title.
Yeah.
First of all, um, the blurb though states that it will help one find purpose.
Mm.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought this up. The book cover was actually designed by a local graphic artist, and he is included in the back because I think he is just phenomenal. And he did illustrations throughout the book. The book is a book that covers heavy topics. We look at your career, we look at family, we look at relationships, we look at your health, but it is all written with humor. And I think that's just incredibly important because these are heavy subjects. The reason that I think it can help you find your purpose is one of the things that I was very intentional about writing was around your foundation.
Mm.
And one of the things I observed, even though I started this book back in my 20s, it's been a minute, I was writing it during the pandemic. And one of the things that I noticed is that a lot of people thought they had a foundation and they really didn't. And so many of those things that we just naturally assumed would be there, like, I mean, it's cliche at this point, toilet paper and Clorox wipes and things in the grocery store, they disappeared. And one of the things I was observing was people were missing their foundation. And so I hope this book helps people establish or review, what am I all about? What is it that I know I have been put on this planet for? It takes some of us a little bit longer, and some of us are always going to be a work in progress. But I hope it will help people discover and get a little bit deeper into their foundation, which can absolutely help with your purpose.
You mentioned that the book took a minute.
Yeah.
So from start, inception until it was actually published though, how long do you think that was? Like when you first finished that draft, the first draft, from the time you finished till it was actually published, do you remember how long it took?
Oh, let me think about this. So I had started writing snippets back in my 20s because I kept thinking, why didn't anybody tell me this was going to happen? And I would just add to it. And I finally said, you know what? I'm going to finish this. It's time. Um, it felt like the perfect time given the types of activities I was involved with, such as mentoring young women and so on. So
Hmm.
I decided to invest in myself, and I invested in kind of a program that gave me some accountability. And so I would say between drafting, I hired a real editor after I had all my smart grammar friends review it and read it and give me their input. I did hire a formal editor. That was something I invested in. I would say I finished it about a year from start to publishing. I published in August of 22, and then I also had very strong intentions to have an audiobook.
Hmm.
So, hey, it's Nashville. Everybody's got a studio. And I had a good friend who had a son who had a studio very close to our home. And so the book is also available on Audible as well, which I'm really proud of. That was, writing about the real things is one thing. Speaking it out loud and recording it is a whole other experience. So I would say probably 14 to 18 months when I really got serious and started writing, drafting, editing, and then moving into the self-publishing piece.
So, what would you say to that writer who has her or his concept, but they're really struggling to get it down on paper? They're really good at storytelling, and you are very good at storytelling, but how do you get it from your mind to the paper?
One of the things I think is important, and I do this when my training and my coaching and my speaking, find what works for you. Some people are longhand writers, others are verbal processors. Well, the cool thing about technology is you can speak into your phone and it converts it to text, and there's your text. So think about what is going to be the right fit for you. The other thing that I think is really important is give yourself a repository, if you will. For me, I'm an Evernote user. And what I love about Evernote is I can tag things. So I could tag something chapter one ideas or tag certain topics. And so sometimes it was literally, I'd get a random thought while I was getting ready in the morning, because that's when they come. And I would dump that into my Evernote for processing later. But I got that snippet, I got that idea, I got that, oh, I need to remember to write about this. And so what that did was it was building my content so then I could then work on putting it together. But I really want people to work. I would encourage people to work in their strengths. If sitting down and writing, you get more worried about spelling and format, then dump it verbal. But don't get so caught up in the format and making it look pretty. That can come, that will come, and you can use your resources. So that is one of the recommendations I would put out there.
Are you a member of any groups, any writers, assistant groups, any critiques?
Thanks for to a mutual connection that we have, I discovered that there is a local writers group just in my city. I had absolutely no idea in the small suburb that I'm in how many writers there are. And so this person said, hey, did you know? And it really was encouraging. They write more fiction, but at the same time, a lot of their processes and a lot of just the general encouragement. I had the opportunity to have pieces of one of the things that I'm working on read out loud, and then in a very supportive, constructive environment, got feedback. My gosh, that was valuable. So that is a group that I don't get to enough, but I have attended several times, and it is absolutely on my list for this year as well.
Well, how does it feel when you are with someone that writes in a different genre than you, being able to have that connection still?
One of the things is learning about their process, because at the end of the day, you got to write. You've got to do the work. And so when you hear, I'm stunned at the self-discipline that people have, and they have, even if they don't, write anything that they're going to use, they have that habit. There is a great author, Stephen Pressfield. He wrote a book called The War of Art, not the Art of War. And one of the things he's constantly saying is just do the work. Your pages, I think it was Hemingway, maybe somebody else that did this, your pages may not be used, but you're doing the work. You're getting in that discipline and you're developing your craft. And that's one of the things that is really inspiring to be around those folks, because they're on it. And it kind of gives me a nudge as well.
Well, Kelly, would you read some of your work for us today?
I would love to. So the book idea came from this is a book, and I will just kind of segue here for a moment. When people hear the title of the book, they think, oh, well, I'm past that. I've actually had people look at my book in different author events are like, yeah, I know all that stuff. I don't need it. And they just kind of walk on. And so you just have to kind of, let that wash off you because sometimes people don't take the time. The other thing is a lot of people think this book was written for just women in a certain age because of the subtitle. What has been extremely rewarding is that this book was written for that group, but it has resonated across generations. I've had men and women into their 80s that have read this book because the themes are common themes. We're always going to have friendships. We're always going to be looking at losing parents and losing friends and career, all the things. And
Hmm.
so it has a lot of relevance to it. So I'm trying to I'll talk about the more the beginning. So I speak to a long, long time ago in a land far away lived a 19-year-old young woman. She had a firm figure and her hair was naturally golden blonde. No hair color had touched her locks other than for fun. No clothes had yet gone to the back of the closet because they no longer fit. She walked with zest and confidence most days. Then she had a birthday and her 20s began. That's when she found herself in the car, driving with her mother on the precipice of encountering enlightenment. So I go on to share a funny story that led me to say, wait a minute, how come when no one told me this was going to happen? And I got a bit braver. I began to bring up chin and other areas of the body into conversations with others with some hesitancy and often in the form of a joke. My mom shared her experience as well in more detail than I wanted her to, God love her. And my point, you are not alone. Be encouraged. Allow yourself to grow. But let's just not encourage those pesky chin hairs to grow. That is, of course, unless you've embraced them as part of your identity. Peace to you.
But it doesn't sound
And,
like it's part of your identity.
maybe not. And then if I may read just a little bit more. Beyond chin hairs, there are so many things I wish I'd known about when I was in my 20s. I want you, my dear reader, not to have to go through the same angst. No matter your background, skin color, faith, social media status, socioeconomic level, and so on. I've got your back hair on chin hairs and a few more things to help you do more than survive through your 20s and beyond.
It sounds like that you and your mom have had some pretty challenging conversations.
My mother had a very unique childhood in that she didn't grow up with a mom. And so I remember being a very demanding child, and there's some funny stories in here. And then I found out some more. But one of the things we had was a very authentic relationship. And there were times when, people have always been surprised at how directly we speak with each other. And they're like, this doesn't seem normal, especially if you are in more of a traditional Southern environment. But one of the things I can say is she read the book. She laughed, she cried, she endorsed it, she bought it for her siblings. So that was to me a confirmation of the things that I was writing about. But mom daughter relationships can be quite complex. And no matter how good they are, I think there's always going to be that complexity. And then you're still two individuals trying to figure things out. And so I think that is something that I've continued to learn is that just like I'm trying to figure things out, we all are trying to figure things out. And it's allowed, hopefully, us to have a little more grace with each other.
I think that the fact that you write about really hard topics with humor
Yeah.
is a gift. It's very challenging for writers to be able to express themselves in a way that gives them the grace to talk about something in a humorous way. And I think it makes it more palatable to be able to hear those hard things. So kudos to you for that. Kelly, can you tell us about Postmaster International? I don't know very much about that program, so tell us about it.
Yeah, so Toastmasters has been around over 100 years. It's international. I always joke, I wish I joined it 25 years ago. And it is such a powerful organization because it helps you in more ways than just getting up and giving a speech. Back in the day when it was more of a traditional organization, it was an organization that was started and women were not originally, allowed. Again, we're talking over 100 years ago. It
Mhm.
was for people who wanted to be able to do a better toast at an event or be an MC, and it's really expanded. So I decided to join, I think back in 2016, and I had to overcome something. I have loved public speaking, as random as that sounds, since I was little. And I was always comfortable speaking in front of groups. So one of the things that I had people tell me is you should join Toastmasters that'll help you, get better. My fear was, what if I join and find out I really stink? Because people tell you you're great, and then what if? And I had to come to the place was like, okay, what if? Then I've got to take a beginner's mindset and get better. And I was so fortunate. I joined a club where I was one of the older people. And so it gave me great insights into the struggles of younger professionals. These
Mhm.
folks had not necessarily started families at that point or got married. And during our time together, people married, they had their first children. And I've stayed in touch with so many of them. So the Toastmasters organization is just incredibly powerful from the perspective of building relationships, really refining your speaking, but way beyond giving a speech. So, for example, yes, do you learn how to give a speech? But they also have a program called Pathways. I'm an inner leadership coach. Well, they have a pathway for coaches. They have a pathway for people who want to do more with social media and so on. It is a great organization. And what's really cool about it, just like any organization, every chapter has its own culture. So
Mhm.
you visit a couple and you just go to toastmasters.org, look up the ones in your area. If you want hybrid, use hybrid. If you want in person, go to in person. If you want only Zoom, go to an only Zoom. And you'll find a fit. It sometimes may take longer, but that's one of the things that's cool about the organization as well. If you're trying to develop as a leader, that is something I knew I wanted to do. I wanted better leadership skills. And I was in a pretty flat organization where there wasn't a lot of upward mobility, but that was something I knew I wanted to develop. Toastmasters gave me that opportunity. I ended up as a VP of education and then moved into a president role. And then at one of the law firms I've worked at, I actually started, to our knowledge, the only Toastmasters club in Tennessee in a law firm. So then I had the opportunity to learn how to create a club and charter it and get people to sign up. Those are phenomenal skills that it takes a long time to get those in a more formal environment.
How do you feel that that has enhanced your writing ability?
One of the things that Toastmasters does is they have speech contests. I am by nature a serious person. I think that I would love to have the great sense of humor, but I have just a natural bent towards more seriousness. I think the older I get, I'll get a little bit softer on that. I actually entered some speech contests, and one of the speech contests was a humor contest. I was not yet writing my book. And I won second place. I was so mad. I wanted first so bad I couldn't stand it. But the title of the speech was "We Can Laugh About It Now." And so I really shared a lot of my experiences, blended family, children, and so on,
Mhm.
and shared kind of similar to what I did in the book, some tough topics without oversharing, and then found the humor so that I could share my learnings as well. So Toastmasters gets you to where you can do those kinds of things. It also has an element of extemporaneous speaking. So that ability just to do that, tell me about yourself. I need to get back into it because I'm not as sharp as I was. That's a big deal, especially if you're not a natural in those areas. People assume to be a good speaker or coach that you have to be an extrovert. Um, that's not true. It's often finding those things that you love to share and interact about. And then a lot of that other stuff just kind of, it's a little less.
I think that's a very good point because a lot of the writers that I am privileged to know are introverts.
Mhm.
And but they write incredible work that they want to get out to the masses because they have a story to tell. It's very important what they have to say. But one of the hardest things that they have to do is to share their brand themselves. They have a very hard time selling that. And public speaking, it does not come easy to them. So this sounds like it would be a good program for them to kind of get that courage to be able
I,
to do that.
I absolutely love what you're saying. The person that did all the illustrations in my book, he and I have remained friends. He designed my business logo. He's just that person. He's
Mhm.
also extremely shy. He's not going to be the first person to talk. And we met at a freelancers group, oh gosh, 7, 8, 9 years ago. And I remember thinking, this person has a lot in them. I'm going to drag it out of them. And I actually talked him into joining Toastmasters because I knew that he has such talent. He has been gifted and given innate, beautiful talent. The other thing that I think people forget is listening skills. His listening skills. I'm married an introvert. One of the things that I think is underrated is the listening skills and the ability to just hear someone and digest and do it in a way that's not intimidating. And we need more listeners. So I always encourage people, even if people drain you, that's one of the things I always ask, are you drained by people or are you energized? Even if people drain you, you have this, like you said, you have a story to tell. You've been put on this planet on purpose for a purpose. And then you can find those things that are the right fit for you. If you don't want to do this particular type of speaking, then don't do it. But you're going to find those places that are a fit. And often when you get people talking about what they love, all that other stuff goes away.
It comes pretty naturally at that point, I would think, not so forced. Well, Kelly, tell us about what projects that you are currently working on.
So one of the things that I did when I wrote the book, everybody's like, you always have to have a freebie, all the marketing. One of the things I wrote was a very quick journal called Looking in the Mirror. At the end of each chapter in the book are reflection questions. And one of the things that I made it as a PDF, you can go to my website, get free PDF. But I had some people say, boy, I wish this was a book. I wish I could write in it. There are those people that have journals and the pens and the pencil bag and all the things. And I thought, you know what? This could be something that could actually be a complement to the book. You could package it together. And so, one of the things, I've got a whole stack behind me. One thing I did last year is I wrote a lot to help expand the journal. And so, my goal this year is by mid year, I want to revamp that because the journal is maybe 11 pages, and I knew it needed to be a lot more content. And then I'm also building my faith into that a little bit more. I still want to keep it very accessible, but it is so much of who I am. And so that is something that I'm really seeking the right direction on so that I'm doing it in a way that is authentic and real, and not canned, if that makes any sense. So I have a whole stack hiding behind my back here of tons of written notes that I will start to accentuate that journal. I'd love to self-publish that into its own book. And then I'm also just still picking around with content for another book. And the title is loosely, You're Going to Need More Than Tweezers.
I love it. Titles are the hardest things for some people to come up with because it has to be able to grab you. And that one sounds like, no pun intended, it really would. It would grab you.
I hope so. I've had people go, okay, when are you going to write, 40s and beyond? And I'm like, man, I'm right in the middle of all that. But there is some additional content that I think would be relevant. That would be a nice tie-in. And so that's what I've been picking with. And again, just dumping things into Evernote as they come to me.
Do you think that you will ever write a journal for teens?
I worked with teens. I worked with teens in college and in my early 20s and a little bit over the last few years. I think I would have to be very inspired and directed because one of the things that I believe just very strongly is that teens, they recognize when there is authenticity and when somebody is being real and
Right.
when they're just putting you on. They, I have a term that I don't want to use, but they have a very strong filter. How about that? And so if I wrote something, I would really want to feel like it was going to be right for them. I do have several young women that, I've mentored when they were in high school and now they're in their 20s. And they're going to take a while to size you up. So I'd want to make sure that the journal would be useful.
Well, Kelly, tell us about where we can find your work. You mentioned you have a website.
Yep. I do. So, just like anybody else, every time I put it out there, I want to go fix it because those things are always works in progress. But it's kellyknowles.net. So www.kellyknowles.net. And then there is a tab specifically for my book. You can search for my book on Amazon, and it is in a Kindle book. It's a paperback that you can purchase, and then also on Audible. So.
And I encourage everyone to check out this book. It is really fascinating. And Kelly, I just wish you all the very best in your writing future. And it's not easy to write to help someone else. So I thank you for that contribution to our world. I wanted to ask you before we leave, in 300 years from now, where do you see your legacy being? What do you want people to see when they read your work?
One of the things that I did a few years ago is I wrote my eulogy. And my husband came home and I said, "Hey, I wrote my eulogy." And he just looked at me like, "Yep, that would be something you would do." Because I really wanted to think about, and this helps you find your purpose, by the way. I really wanted to think about what would my legacy be? What would I want to make sure that was remembered? And 300 years, gosh, I hope that I'm done asking God questions by then because I have so many. But one of the things that I would love to be remembered for is that I encourage people to act on their purpose, that I encourage people to take steps. I got a text the other day from a former client, and she has a huge heart for animals, and she works full time and is super busy. And so we just talked about simple ways that she could make an impact. And so she sent me a text that said, "Hey, I put out a post." And just a few minutes later, "Hey, I've already got people donating." And I thought, you know what? That's a win because it's helping her take action on what her heart was crying and calling for.
Mhm.
Win. I don't need anything else. That to me was one of my favorite texts of the year so far.
Yay. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for taking your time to spend with us today at Briar Haus Writes.